Hi, in this Unity tutorial, we are going to go over making a network multiplayer game. So what I have here is a built version of my simple network game, and I'm going to start two instances of it. That's one instance I'm going to start, and it's going to be windowed, so I could put them both on my screen at the same time. And this is the second instance of it. Okay, and I will choose one game to be the host. Bam, and my player comes in and I can move the player around with the keys. And then I will choose the other instance to be a client. Boom, and the client can move around. As you can see, when I move the client around in the client game, he is also being duplicated motion in the host game. And over here, if I move the host, first I click on the host here and I'm moving. So there's a game where we are both two separate instances of the game. This could be running on one computer, this could be running on another computer, and we're both playing in the same game. So right now, my address is localhost, which is basically the address of my current computer, this one computer. But if I were to have this running on one computer, and this is actually a different computer it's running on, I can't use localhost on both of them. I'm going to have to get what the IP address is for them. So I would come here, CMD, open up the command prompt, and I would type ipconfig, and this would give me the IP address of the computer I'm on right now. So instead of just using localhost, if I put in the IP address right here, Control C, and put that in for my client, Control V, and this guy's going to run on the same thing, Control V. Now let's see when I start again. There's my host player, and here's my client player, and it works again. So that'll be the only difference. If I actually have two different computers, I'm going to have to make sure it doesn't say localhost, but I actually put in the IP address of the computer. Now let's see, how do we make this type of a game in Unity? All right, let's look over how did we do a network game in Unity. So here is the scene I had set up. I'm going to start over a new scene. So we're going to start from scratch. The first thing I have is a ground plane that I'm going to add in so that our players could have something to walk around on. And I'm just going to make it a cube and set the size to, well, first let me reset it, position and everything. And then I'm going to set the size to 20 on the X, no, 30 on the X. Let's do 30 on the X and 30 on the Z to make a nice wide flat surface. I have a texture here to put down for the floor. Okay, so we could see motion. So remember, blue is forward, and I'm going to just have the camera align with that view. Boom. Okay, and now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a player, which is this prefab over here. So I made my player in Magical Voxel, and now I'm just going to drag and drop him in. And at first, when I get things from Magical Voxel, they are huge, and they're also parented by an empty game object. So I'm just going to select the actual child object, which does have the mesh, and I'll just make that its own. Okay, then I could delete the empty game object. So now I have my character, but he's really big. That's fine. I'll just shrink him down to size. I'll do 0.05, 0.05, 0.05. Oops. And 0.05 on X, Y, and Z. Now he's more reasonable size to match up with other things in my game. All right, so I have him here, and now I'm just going to add something else. Let's add a capsule collider, physical capsule collider, and you can see there's a capsule collider that was added on him there. And then I'm going to add a rigid body, physics, rigid body. All right, now when I add the rigid body, I don't want him to fall over when he hits things. So I'm just going to freeze on the X and the Z rotation so he stays standing up. And I'm also going to have him, sometimes when he hits things, if the rigid body doesn't have any drag on the angular or just drag in general, he starts, it's kind of like an asteroid in space. He gets hit and he just drifts away. So I'm just going to have some drag put on there in case something does hit him that he doesn't go flying away on both the drag and the angular drag. So now my rigid body set up, I got the capsule collider. Now let's add a script to control the movement of the player. So I have a script that I already wrote here called user control. So I'm just going to add that script here to the player and move speed, turn speed. Okay, so let's take a look at this script. It's very short. It's basically has two public variables, one for move and one for turn with some default values. And then it has an update function. And the update function, it reads the vertical input from the user and the horizontal input from the user and puts those values into vert and horizontal. These values will be from -1 to a +1. And vertical and horizontal are part of the input manager default input settings. Okay, so there we get the input. And then here we do the translation is going to move our character. If I do a transform translate, that moves the character. And the axis we're going to move on is the forward axis. That is the Z axis here that's pointing forward. So I take on that axis, I move whatever the vert is. So if vert is 0, I'm not moving. If vert is -1, I'm moving backwards, and if vert is +1, I'm moving forward. And moving one unit at a time is slow or fast, so then I just multiply that by the move speed, so I could be moving faster if I want to. How much faster? However big I make that number. And then I multiply by time delta time to smooth out the movement on all computers. So this moves my character forward and back. And then this line over here, transform local rotation times equals, it's going to take whatever rotation my character is at and just add or subtract from it on an angle on an axis. So first value here is the horizontal, which again is from -1 to 1. So I could either be turning in one direction or the other direction, to the left or to the right. And the same thing, this is only from 1 to 1, so I could increase the speed that I'm turning by giving it a number, by multiplying by that number. So instead of 1 to 1, it could be from -120 to 120. Now I'm turning a little faster, and then I smooth it out with time delta time. And what axis am I turning on? I'm turning on the up axis. The up axis is this arrow right here, so he's turning like this, looking the left and the right. So this should take care of my character moving. Let me save it. And then I'm going to look over here in the game and press play. Let's wait for the script to be processed. I'll press play, and the character should be able to be moved with the arrow keys, okay? Or the WASD keys. Turning, moving forward, moving backward. All right, so that works. My character is somebody I can move around. But now I want to make my character ready for network play. So I'm going to have to add in some networking components. So I go to add component, network, and I want to have my character have a network identity. So I add that. And on the network identity, I want to make sure I check this box here. Okay, that is going to make it that the player is only controlled by the local client. Then I'm going to add one more network component. It's the network transform. And the network transform, this is going to take care of sending the signal to the other network games about the position of my player. Okay, and that should take care of that for my network player. So I'll just drag and drop a copy to make this a prefab right here in my folder. So now I have a prefab for my player. Okay. Now what else do I need? After I've made a player that's a network player, I need to have some kind of manager in my scene that's going to manage the network. So I'm going to just add an empty object, and I'm just going to call this the network manager. It's an empty game object. And to this empty game object, I want to add some components. So my first component is a network component called network manager. Okay. And my second component is a network, oops, that was navigation. Network manager HUD. Okay. So this is doing all the network management, and this is going to give me a little HUD display for the button to click if I'm a host or a client, etc. All right. Now, over here in the network manager, there's a thing called spawn info, and it's asking me what is the player prefab, what's going to be spawned when the game starts. So that's why I had to take in my Omar Vision character and dragged and dropped them here as a prefab. So now since I have them as a prefab, I could define this as the player prefab character. All right. So now if I press play, well, let me just show you something. Before I put this guy in as a prefab character, let me just say I don't have that set. Now that I have the network manager that spawns a player, and this character right here is a network player, when I press play, this HUD comes up. That's what the network manager HUD takes care of. And then I say I'm going to be the host, so I'll say host, and now the character pops into the screen because he's right here, okay? But that's not spawned in from the game. So I have to take out this one in the scene. The network manager is going to spawn my player into the game. If I press play now, but I didn't set the player prefab, I press localhost and the player doesn't spawn into the scene. So that's why the player prefab is here. I could paste this here, and now when I press play, I say host, and it's the network manager that spawns my player into the scene. All right. So now that I have this set up, that it's spawning a player into the scene, let me do a build. So I'm going to do build settings over here. And I just want to make sure, since I'm going to have two of them playing at the same time, what's my scene? Untitled. Let me add the open scene untitled. Oh, I better save my scene then first. Okay, wait. Back out. Let me save this untitled scene, file save, and I'll call it scene 2. Okay, there, now it has a name. Now I could say build settings, and I'm going to add the open scene, scene 2, and I'm going to take off the sample scene from my demo. So I'll have scene 2 here, and I want to do the player settings so that this opens up in a windowed mode. Good. So I press player settings, and then over here the player settings comes up in the inspector. And I could say that I want it to be windowed by default, 800 to 600 pixels. Good. Let me build and run this. So it's asking me for where do I want to build it, and I'm just going to build it here. Network, I'm going to build it. I made a folder called bin, and this is where I'm just going to place my build. So it's building and running. Go ahead. Here it goes. To run. There it is. Oops, I lost you. Where'd you go? There it is. It's running. So let me run this version of it. Okay. And there it is, waiting. And then the other version of it, I'm just going to run it right here in my browser. I mean, in the Unity editor. So I'm going to press play. And I'm going to say this one's the host, and there I am, my little character. I'll move from the beginning spot a little bit. And then over here in this one, I'm going to be the client. So there we go, we got two characters. So let's see on the client, can I move him around? Yes, I can, but both of them are moving. Okay, and then here on the host, there's two characters in there, and I'm pressing play and I'm controlling both of them. So now we got to do one more thing. We have to set up a script so that the player that is for your game is the only one that you could control. So this is the user control script. If this script is on my prefab, my player prefab, then when I press the keys, I'm going to control it. So the problem is that this script is on both the host player and the client's player. So everybody's controlling both of them. So let me just turn this off by default. And what I'm going to do is I have another script called setup local player that I'm going to add to my prefab. So here's a prefab. And then setup local player, I'm just going to add this script here to my network player, and I'll just put it right here under the user control. Okay. And now what's in this script? Let's take a look. I'm going to open it up, and it's real simple. One, note that this is a network behavior class, not the mono behavior class that's in the regular scripts that we use. This is a network behavior class, and to have access to the network behavior class, we have a using statement that includes unityengine.networking. Okay, so set up local player derived off of network behavior class. I make a start function, and in the start function, there's a special variable called isLocalPlayer. So with this script attached to the player prefab, isLocalPlayer will be set to true if this is the player, if this is your player, not somebody else's player. So if this is your player when you're starting a game, I want to enable the user control script and turn it on. Okay? Since over here by default it's off, when you join the game, if your character is the local player, then you will be able to control this character. This turns on the user control script. This is the user control script. Okay, this is the user control script, and it's going to put the check mark back in there. It's going to put the check mark back in there with enabled equal true. Okay, now with this script on, let me just apply, well, it is applied since I was modifying the prefab. To make sure it's saved as a prefab, it is. And with that script on there, let's try this again. But remember, I'll have to do a build and run the one here in the game too. So I'm going to say File, Build Settings again, or I'll just say Build and Run since I already had set the settings previously. So I do a build and run. My one instance of it, and I'll just say play for this one. Okay, it doesn't matter which one I'm saying is the host or the client. And then I'll just also do a play over here on this one. Play. So now I have two instances running, one in my Unity and one executable over here. So I'll make this one, just to show you they could either be this one I'll make the host this time. And I'll just move him from his original spot. And then this one I'll say client. And now you can see the client, I'm only controlling the one that's my client that I jumped in with. And over here at the host, that's this guy, I'm only controlling the host. So now I have it where I'm controlling only the player that I have. So that's the way you set it up. From here, we'll see what we do next in the next tutorial. But now I have it that I have two instances of the game and they're each controlling their own thing. So let me just review that. This is my character that I made a prefab of, right? And I could drag and drop him in the scene if I wanted to. Now the character has to have, I have a capsule collider and a rigid body just so you could interact with the environment. But the things that make it a network player, a network character, is that it has a network identity, which I clicked local player authorize. Let me just spread this out so we can read it better. Local player authority, I clicked that. And it also has a network transform so that it could send out its position to the rest of the game. And then I have in my scene a network manager, which has a network manager script. And in it, I tell it what object to spawn as a child, which means I don't need the object in the game. I tell it what object to spawn as the player prefab. And then it has a little HUD that it shows. So when the game starts, we could pick if we wanted to be a host or a client and different options. Whew, not bad. You know what? There's only one thing I didn't show you though. I did show you the setups local script. Yeah, we did. Okay, so there you go. That's it.